G'day and welcome back to another video. This is in my training series where I'm trying to train and improve my own chess, aiming to win the local Canberra Chess Club Championship this year. And failing that, or if I'm unable to participate because of work commitments, well, I'm trying to get up to a rating of 2000 on chess.com by the end of the year. As part of that, I'm doing tactics training twice a week. And while I haven't set my exact targets, today we're going to go for 90 minutes. And in general, what I want to be able to do is do 50 puzzles in a row on Puzzle Streak on lichess.org, getting them all correct. So I want to be able to reach 50 comfortably and consistently within a 90-minute time frame. That's basically the goal, and it will remain the goal as we move forward in this preparation period. Now let's start. It's white to move. I probably won't say too much because I need to be training in the way where I'm going to be playing games. And when I'm playing games in the tournaments, I'm not really commentating, but I will, of course, discuss my thoughts at each puzzle once I think I've worked it out. Actually, for the sake of the video, I will discuss my thoughts as we go. So I was just having a look at Rook E8 check. And this is one of those violent moves that forces a response from the opponent. Has to go with King H7. Question is, what can we follow up with there? There's no check here, but there is a check over this way. So if we then do play this Queen D3 move with check, there's no point in just giving us this pawn, so he's not going to do that. But he can't move the king anywhere. He's actually forced to play this move in such a circumstance. The question is, can we then follow up in some other way? And I'm not sure whether we can. We can then bring our queen up here and threaten to just play check, and when he moves, we'll get a checkmate in somewhere, potentially. So after check, check, and he comes here, that's really the question we're looking at, is what do we do in this circumstance? Maybe we can play F5, threatening check. But he just moves, and again, where are we heading from there? Another possibility would be to play check. It's a very violent move, but let's say he takes. We can then give this check, forcing him back, and then we're sort of stuck. So I don't think that's going to be the answer either. But check, check. He moves to G6. What have we got there? We could also then play this kind of a move, but let's say he takes the pawn here. We take queen, he takes. Doesn't look fantastic. So what else can we really do here? What else can we do? Maybe we could start with the queen move, queen G6, to take this square away from him, to prevent this pawn from moving forward. So our threat there, if we play this queen G6 move, the immediate threat is checkmate. So it's still a violent move, even though it doesn't start with a check. It's violent in the sense that it forces black's hand. Black must respond to the threat of checkmate. There are some ways to respond to the threat of checkmate, but it seems like they all rely on covering this square. Now that can't be done by the queen from here, because we simply take the queen. It can't be done by the queen here because, again, we simply take the queen. So it would seem that the only real way would be to bring this rook back and cover the square that way. But in that circumstance, the rook abandons this rank, and therefore we could play this. And I think that's going to be the answer. No, it's not the answer, and there you go. So my first game, the training game in this sort of training period, was a loss. The very first puzzle streak is a streak of 0. So what was the answer then? After he comes here, I was thinking we had to play this, which is correct. But what is the point? So after he plays this, I didn't see the follow-up. I didn't see what the follow-up was here. Is it possibly this move? Queen d5, which hits a rook and also threatens checkmate. Maybe, but I thought that if he takes with the queen, he protects the rook and he also defends against checkmate. So I didn't see why this should be so great. Was it perhaps this move? Queen d8, as I discussed, threatening some sort of mating ideas. Now, at the very least here, there's a check. I move away. There's no more checks. So let's say he takes the pawn. I go check. He comes here. And I go mate. So therefore, he probably can't afford to take the pawn, but maybe he can push one of his own pawns to a different area. Then I go check. He comes here. This check would then allow him to move away in such a fashion. I guess then there's a check which wins a rook. And here we're certainly winning. But I just really didn't see the follow-up here. And I'd like now to get the engine's input before we start a new puzzle streak. So what is the move here? Well, there are a few very good moves here. There are a few. The engine's sort of going back and forth, but let's go with the Queen d5 one. Like I said, Queen takes here. What's the response? Oh, now that's a beautiful move. Check. Now, if the king goes up, well, that's going to be... Is that going to be... You know, in many ways, it's very bad. In many ways, it's very bad. So the king won't go up, but instead if he takes the rook, well then he's left the queen as a sitting duck. So that actually was probably the point of the tactic and what I missed. If I turn the engine back off now, that's amazingly after this move he takes, we can disconnect the rook from the queen by providing this check. And then if the king goes back, well, we can just immediately win a rook. So that's an exceptionally nice move. Very difficult for the first puzzle of the day. I would say it was difficult for me, but let's try a new streak and keep on going because that is what we're here to do. Not here to be perfect, but here to improve. Now, the first move that comes to mind is, of course, bishop f7 check. That king can't go anywhere here. There's only one square available to it, and then we can play check like this, which will be a checkmate. Now that's kind of what I more expected as the first kind of a puzzle in the streak. Anyway, let's move on. Here's a check. Now that king would in fact be checkmated. So that's just a simple mate in one. Here it's black to move. Now this pawn cannot take the knight, but we can see there's a checkmate there. It's a smothered mate of sorts. Now I like this because there's going to be a lot of end games played in the Canberra Chess Club Championship. I'm sure of it, and I'm sure I'll be in some of those end games. And it's important to be up to speed on how to play them to the best of your ability. Now, this looks like one of those scenarios where black's moved on to a so-called mined square, a square with a mine on it, metaphorically speaking. Now, if we were to try and play, let's say, king c3, defending our pawn, also attacking his pawn, he actually cannot move anywhere that also defends the pawn. This is taken by our pawn. So therefore the king has to move away. He could say, for example, come here, but once we then take his pawn, he takes ours, and we start pushing our pawn. He starts pushing his pawn. All right, so this is, I was drawing arrows there, but I probably wasn't calculating the best moves. So I'm actually going to have a think. You have a think as well. And then we'll come back and discuss. So I'm going to start thinking about king c3, king e4, king takes c4, king takes f4, and then d5, king e4, sorry, king e5. Maybe what I want to do though is take the opposition from him. Opposition's obviously important in endgame. So let's say king c3, and I'll draw the arrows. King c3, king e4, king takes c4, king takes f4. I would love to be able to play king here, but I don't think that's really going to work either. So another possibility here is this. He still has to move the king. He can't move it here or here now. So his king either has to move back or he can move this pawn forward. Those are really the only other options. These two pawns can't move. So it's either move the king back somewhere. And then again, we can repeat the position. So because there's the option of a repetition, I don't think that's going to be the answer. So therefore, we can basically start with this move. Now, in this position, I think we have to take, but what do we do from here? Maybe we come here to prevent his king from getting out of the way over here. Let's say he then comes here, but then we follow him. And if he ever takes this pawn, we take here. I think that's going to be the answer. Once again, wrong. The streak was only 3, and I'm trying to get to a streak of 50. Now, what would have been so wrong about me taking this position here? I suppose he can come here, but then I come here. And then we have a pawn race on our hands, which we both queen. Clearly not best, but what happens after this? I need to, if I want my pawn to progress, I need to defend it. So let's say he starts pushing his pawn now, I push. If he pushes again, I push. And I get my queen first. And this construction automatically looks like something I know, that when the queen comes here, this king, unable to move this way and unable to stay on this line, is going to have to move into the same line as his soon-to-be queen. So therefore, we're going to have a check, and we're going to take. In fact, in the Winning Chess series that I have on YouTube, there is this exact pattern where the answer is a check, a skewer, and then picking up the queen. The difficulty is in seeing it from afar. So those arrows I was initially calculating, where I was drawing arrows here and here and here. Not drawing very good arrows with this mouse. Was actually the correct thought. Just had to go a bit further, that when you both get the queen, our kings being opposed to each other like this, and it being my move, allows check and then a skewer and winning the queen. Let's do a new streak. We've got to get to trying to get to 50 in a row here. So something really needs to improve, because at the moment we're nowhere near it. Now, here's an obvious fork. And at the end of that, how can it possibly be bad? Because we're just winning a free piece. So in this position, it's white to move. There is a check here, and that's going to be mate after the next move. It's a mating pattern. Here there is a nice fork. There's also just a free bishop here. But after we take check, he moves, we take, he takes, and we take, we're clearly winning. Now we could take this, but he takes back. What else have we got here? There's an undefended knight over this area of the board. Very difficult to attack it at the moment. We could try and play something like e5, attacking this knight. If he takes, we take again, hitting this knight. If the knight moves, where can it move to? Well, it can move, for instance, here, but that would drop the bishop, which we could take after we take the queen with check. So really that knight would have to move back somewhere like this, at which point I don't see any incredible follow-up, but now I do see a move here. There is this check, which just wins the bishop. So that's nice. Again, I think with all these things, we need to practice methodical thinking. So we got to think about all the violent moves first. There's a check there, there's a check there. Those are both very violent. There's a capture here, there's a capture here. Those are also very violent. Any threats of mates, I don't see right away, but let's just go through the list. So here's a check, we simply lose the queen. We gain another queen, but we lose it straight away. That's not going to be the answer. Check is potentially going to be the answer though, because this forces the king. Well, actually, it's just a checkmate. So it's not particularly difficult, but you do need to be able to see it. Now here, I think we can take this, drag the king onto this square, then take a pawn with check. After he deals with the check, we take this and we've just up too much material. So a nice little forking idea there. Here, there is this classic construction where we get to move the bishop away and win a queen. So again, if you've been watching the Winning Chess series, that one should be very obvious at this point. Now here, there's a check. The rook can't be taken. The king must move, and then we can bring our queen over here and provide a checkmate. So that's a mate in 2. And this streak is up to 8. So we're doing better than we have in the past. Now, how do we actually proceed? We can provide a check. He takes the pawn. However, then what can we do? We can provide a check here. If he takes our rook, is there any fork of the king and queen? Not that I can see. Not that I can see. But now that I look at it again, after check, if he takes the pawn, the fork exists over here. So that means that after check, he cannot take the pawn. He would have to move back. If he moves back, well, then we can go here and take with check. That forces him here, and then we mate him, so that's going to be the answer. In this position, of course, we can trade queens. But what else have we here? We can take a pawn here as well. Those are both quite violent, but there's also this very violent move here, checkmate, supported by the bishop. Here we can just win a rook. Typically a nice thing to do. Our king is within the square, or we can make our king within the square of this pawn so that the pawn can't actually promote. If we were to do that, he can try and provide more support to the queening square, but then we just either give him a check, forcing him away, or we then bring our rook here to permanently prevent it. So I think that's going to be the answer. Providing this check here from the side, that was a nice idea that I missed. I did miss that. Now we can't take because he's going to get a queen with check. But I guess what we can do is just step in front of his queening pawn and thereby prevent it from queening. Here I think the obvious answer is to play this move, d5, go after this pawn, then come here, take this pawn, move out of the way, and try and get a queen. Problem is, will he be able to get a draw if we go for something like that? For instance, let's say this, he comes here, 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 here. I don't think that quite works for him. He's a little bit too late. And we need to be able to practice visualizing these things. So king d5, let's say he even throws in c6 first. So king takes on c6. Let's say he goes after our pawn by going f4. Okay, so then we go king c5, he takes on f4, king b4, he comes to e5, We take, he goes to d5. No, this is going to win for us for sure. He's just a move too slow. Now, in this position, we have the option to give a check and also support this square, which is important because it then allows a skewer. And after the skewer, the queen's going to move. We're going to take the rook. The queen's going to capture back. And we're both going to be left with a queen. We're going to have 6 pawns, and he's going to only have 5. So that's a way to simplify into a position where we have 1 extra pawn in the endgame, 2 of which are connected past pawns, and you must basically assume that's going to be really good for us. Really good for us. So it's very hard to go past this move of check. Any kind of blocking move that he might make is a disaster. So I think he just simply moves the king somewhere and allows this move to take place. He has to move the queen. There's nowhere he can move the queen with check. And once he does move, we take this. He takes, if we wanted, we could even take an extra pawn. I think that's going to be the move. And here, I accidentally had a mouse slip there. We were going pretty well on that streak. Pure mouse slip. Of course, I wanted to take the rook. As mentioned, if he takes our queen, we just take back. We have much too much material. Let's go with a new streak. We're going to try and get to 50. So here's a check and there's a mate. In this one, if we just start bringing our king back, he takes here. We come here and we are still within the ability to take everything. But why not? Why not just take this pawn? And then once he takes back, then we come here. Now, even if he pushes, we're going to take that. And in the resulting position, what we really want to do is come over and take this flashing pawn over here. Because then we're going to have 2 connected pass pawns, and that's going to be way too strong for his king. So what we could do is even take this pawn like this. No, because then he gets his queen. So I think what we do is simply take. It's basically forced. In this position, it looks like, if we take here, he takes us. So we don't necessarily want to do that. There is also this option of playing check, then doubling back for the rook. I prefer that. There is the option of maybe trying to pin the rook, but regardless, why attack the rook with a rook when you can attack the rook with a bishop? So let's do it that way. In this position, there is a check. Now, the pawn cannot take us because it's pinned. Therefore, after the check, we're going to win the queen. In this position, black's got 2 queens and a rook. We've only got 1 queen and a bishop, but it's probably going to be all we're going to need in this position because we've got this checking ability here, forcing the king back. If instead the bishop tries to defend, we simply mate him with our queen. So this does force, well, actually the king can't go back. It forces that mating position and we win. In this position, it's again our move. What about we move away with check and uncover an attack on this queen? That looks extremely nice. There's absolutely no reason not to do it. In fact, we're going to be mating him. Here, again, can we just take? Well, we lose our queen if we do. And that may not be ideal. But is there anything better we can do? We can play a move like queen b6, taking aim at this pawn. If there's a trade of rooks, it's not necessarily a big deal, but there is also this hanging knight here. You must think, why not just take the knight? It's a free knight. So off we go. Now, this looks like the first thing we saw today. What if we play this move? Check. Disconnecting the rook from the queen so that we can take the queen. Alternatively, the king moves somewhere, and then we take this rook. I think that's a beautiful tactic. And this is why we're practicing, because we're getting our eyes attuned. I don't know if I would have seen that had we not seen the previous similar example. So here our queen is being attacked. Fair enough, you may say. But how are we going to respond? We do have this move here, queen g2, attacking the rook and also attacking the knight. That looks really nice. The only way to actually save the rook is by moving it over here, because the only other option there would be to use the bishop to save the rook, but then that drops the knight. So you can't save both. That looks really nice. We win a knight. Now in this position, this rook is pinned. It cannot move. Therefore, it is less effective than it may otherwise wish to be. But that doesn't mean anything here is easy. What we might play is this rook d8 move. Just bringing two rooks in and therefore threatening to take the bishop with checkmate, keeping in mind this rook cannot move. So if we play this move, is there any way he can save himself from checkmate? Well, I suppose if he pushes this pawn, then we can take the bishop, and instead of being checkmate, he'll move his king away. But in that scenario, we then take the rook. We've won everything. We've got way too much material. That's no good for him. Is there any other way that he can maybe defend this bishop? Maybe he can bring the queen across here. In such a circumstance, however, we can take the queen. Now this rook is unpinned and can recapture our queen, but he still has the problem of checkmate appearing on the board. So I don't see any way to really defend, but it looks like the streak is over. I've made a mistake again. So I thought rook d8 was very, very strong, but it's not, because there is another way to defend this bishop, and it's with the knight. Now, after you defend with the knight, it's much more difficult to find a very great move, isn't it? Much more difficult indeed. You don't want to do anything like this because he simply takes. Yes, that knight move is one that I very much overlooked. So the correct move was actually to reverse the move order and start by taking the bishop. Again, because this guy cannot move, the absolute forced move is king takes. Then there's this check. And now, again, completely forced, the knight must move back. And now take your pick of how you'd like to deliver mate, either with the rook or the queen. Let's go with a new streak. We still have a bit over an hour left in this session, so we can still get to 50 in this if we're playing very well. So far, of course, we haven't been playing particularly well, but that's not to say we won't. Now, here's a check. We do have this long-range bishop supporting us. So after the check, which completely forces the knight to capture us, we can use our pawn here to get another queen, which will be supported and completely mates the king. So rather than taking this bishop, we are going to not muck around. We're going to go check, and then we could even do it with a rook. We could even do it with a rook. So let's do it with a rook, and checkmate has been given. Now here is also a checkmate. My arrows are not very good today, but there's a checkmate. Let's go for it. Now here, that just looks like a free bishop. That looks a lot like a free bishop. If he takes, we are just going to be in a position where he's only got 2 minor pieces and we're going to have 3. So it's just a free piece. Now in this position, there's a beautiful looking fork. This bishop can come back and take, however, and that's a little bit of an annoyance. If only it weren't the case, then we would have something really pretty on our hands with this fork. But after the bishop takes, how we then follow up is not necessarily as clear. So what do we want to play here then? What do we therefore want to play? I guess we can play this, and if the bishop takes, we can just simply take the bishop. In that scenario, we've taken a bishop for a pawn, so we're doing really well. Then I suppose he could take our rook, but we take his queen. So actually that is going to be the correct move. Now, in this position, he's attacking our queen. Bit of a shame. One thing we can do is give a check though. The king can't move. And so he would actually be forced to capture us, at which point we can recapture with mate. So that's nice. Now in this position, it kind of looks like we can just take this bishop. I mean, even though he takes our queen, we take his queen. But keep in mind, we've just taken a bishop. So I think that's going to be the move. And again, it is not. Why not? Why do we not just take the bishop? There he takes our queen. We take his queen. He moves the knight away, winning a pawn and threatening a fork that wins an exchange, all the while attacking our bishop. So this is really not going well. I'm glad that this is the first training session, not the last. We need to come up with a new streak here, but the correct answer here was to actually take the knight, hitting the queen straight away, a much more violent move, forcing him to recapture, and then we can take the bishop at our leisure. Let's go for a new streak. This time I'm going to think a bit harder a lot of the times. Now, the only question here is which piece do we want to take with? I think we take with the queen so we can follow up with mate. In this position, we may want to provide this check because this bishop looks like it's going to hang. In this position, we have a check. We also have the option of providing this check first. That looks like it's going to be the move because after his king moves, which is forced, we can take the rook, and when the bishop drops back, we can capture it with mate. He's just taken a rook, but whoop-de-doo, we've got a check up here. It forces him to move the king away, at which point do we have a follow-up? We do in this knight e6 check. That forces him again to move further, but then our queen comes in with a mate, so we're going to go check, check, checkmate. In this position, first instinct is to take the bishop, but keep in mind the rook would fall. The rook would fall. Therefore, is there a better idea here for us? Maybe, and maybe not. Not only would the rook fall, but the knight would fall after we move the king. So, therefore, I don't think we want to take the bishop. But what about we take this pawn with check? We take the pawn with check after the king moves. He certainly doesn't want to move anywhere here because then we take the bishop with check as well. So therefore, he's going to probably move here, at which point we can actually move our rook across with check again, although that allows the bishop to escape, which we may not want to do. So I think we're just going to take the pawn, and then we're going to take the bishop. All right, so here it's black to move. Black, we're going after this king if we can. We would like to win the king. Now, this move here just kind of looks like a checkmate to me. So there we go. Now in this position, it sort of looks like we're gearing up for one of these tactics of check, and then we're going to take, and that queen's going to be under a lot of fire. But I'm not convinced that that's correct, just straight off the bat. So we've got to make sure we're doing this in the correct manner. So let's employ something called thinking for once. Now that we're only 6 moves into this streak, 44 to go, that's the goal. Just under an hour left on the session. One thing we could do is actually move the bishop here to attack the queen. At the same time as attacking the queen, we're also unleashing our doubled rooks. So let's say he takes one rook, right? Well, then we can take the queen. He can take a second rook, but we take back. Then he takes a bishop. Now, in that case, we've won a rook and a queen for a rook and a bishop. That's really good for us. So I do like that. I'm not afraid of him taking here because we take the queen. Therefore, I think he's going to have to move the queen, probably somewhere, certainly off this diagonal. Should also make sure he can't just take the bishop because we take his queen, and then after he takes here, well, we've just won too much material. Too much material, I would say. And we're going to be winning more material shortly thereafter. In fact, it would lead to a mate. Unless he changed course and gave us even more material. So I think here he's going to probably play the queen to c7 or maybe e7 so that it still defends the rook. In those cases, we can take the rook. He takes back with this rook. We take the rook again, and then he takes with the queen. What have we necessarily gained there, however? I'm not so super sure. So it's not an easy position to me to figure out what we do. But it is a very typical looking position. It's the sort of thing that you may well get in a game. And I would like to know how best to deal with this. So we're going to have to just keep on thinking here. What else have we got at our disposal here? Is he threatening to take the bishop? Not really, we just take back. Is he threatening to maybe improve the position of a knight attacking this pawn? Well, maybe. Maybe he is. But in that circumstance, I feel like Queen E4 both protects the pawn and threatens a very important check there on the H7 square. So it's very much not clear, not easy. Not clear, not easy. This move still comes to mind. But what happens after he moves the queen? That's where we sort of struggle a little bit here. After he moves the queen, what can we then do? I just don't really know. Is there any sense in something like this? I'm not sure. So here, obviously, we've still got quite a few pawns and pieces on the board and lots of different options. So Irving Chernev and Fred Reinfeldt talk about these googles of possibilities. And you can cut down those possibilities by examining really the violent moves first, the moves that force a particular response from your opponent. Moves, I think, such as Bishop F5, attacking the queen and forcing a response is nice. But after he comes here, I suppose one thing we could try there that now comes to mind is that we could maybe improve the position of our queen, putting it onto this diagonal so that this rook becomes pinned. And because it's pinned and we have three things attacking it, we're very likely to win that. Does that make sense? So after this, what happens if he instead comes here? Well, I suppose that if he comes here instead, then we could try to attack the queen. That does allow him to win a rook with check. We move out of the way and then he can move his queen back. So I don't like the look of that necessarily, but after this and this, what else we can do here? Again, it's very difficult to come up with a solution. But other sort of threatening moves here, we're sort of threatening both a queen trade and, well, that's really about it. This is not really threatened as long as the knight is there. So I don't see super violent moves here. I don't see super violent moves really outside of this bishop move. Again, if he moves the queen here, sure, maybe we can play Queen G3 and pin this knight. Then he could play his... No, he can't play the knight there because our bishop doubles back and takes him. But maybe he could move the knight back here where it defends this rook. And I suppose at that point, taking the rook would lead to probably knight takes. And what have we really gained there? I don't know. So I'm very much struggling here. I'm going to have to take a lot more time to try and work this out. Now, b5 came to mind because it does put pressure on this pawn. Now, if he takes back with the queen, then I guess we can take. And if he takes with his rook, then we can play our bishop here attacking this rook while our other rook also attacks. So let's say he takes our rook, then we take a rook, and then this rook is threatening to come up here with devastation, and at the same time we're threatening this rook. So this rook's likely to drop back. And at that point, again, I don't see anything amazing. So this is, to me, really tricky. If you're looking at this at home and you've already got the answer, you're probably screaming at me. You probably turned it off 10 minutes ago. But I don't see what to do. I just don't see the move. Is it this kind of a check here? Well, I doubt it. Even if he were to take with the king, we don't have any follow-up checks that we can actually give because everything's defended by his pieces. So I don't think that's going to be the move, just giving away a bishop for no reason. Not to mention he can take with the knight as well if he wanted. Is it something like this, just moving our bishop back? Well, I doubt that as well, because then he's just going to take our rook. And when we take back, he's going to take this rook. So it's not going to be moving this bishop, I don't think, unless it is this move. But he takes the rook, we take the queen. That's good for us. This move, and he moves the queen somewhere, either here or here. What do we then do, though? That's the question. Yes, we can trade rooks. Then he takes back. But what have we really gained there? We're still down a pawn. Yes, we have a bishop versus a knight with pawns on both sides of the board. But we're down a pawn, and I don't think that's going to be the 100% best that we can do here. I don't mind the idea of this. He moves here and we pin the rook. It just doesn't really seem as though we can win that rook after a move like knight e8. Guarding the rook. Also guarding the queen. So if we take the rook there and he takes back, maybe with his rook, we take, he takes back, he takes back again. We're always simplifying into an endgame where we're down a pawn. So I just don't see this working out so well. Can even go through an inventory in our minds. We've got pins. We've tried to think about how we can use pins. Like, for example, this move, he comes here and we pin the rook. And then we want to generally try and apply more pressure to a pinned piece, but I can't see how that happens. In terms of knight forks, obviously, we don't have a knight in our armamentarium right now, so that we can't really think about that. We can think about double attacks, of course. We can think about discovered attacks. None of them seem to be working. We can think about checks or double checks. I certainly can't see any of them. Really just don't see the follow-up here. I do not see the follow-up. I'm really struggling here. Is it something to do with this g4 idea? I mean, everything in mine is defended. And we can maybe try and come after this knight, which, let's say he comes here even preemptively. Again, this move, very easy for him to defend. I mean, even if he just plays this simple h6, this check's not so violent as I might have thought. Yes, we can provide one extra check. He comes here, we can give a check, but he can block that check. So I don't think that's really it. I'm seeing basically next to nothing. Maybe it's a simple matter of moving our queen and coming after this pawn. And if he does something like this to block the attack, maybe he's weakening this pawn a little bit. How we then go about attacking this pawn, that's also not clear. Also, he could immediately just attack our queen. But okay, we take something in that point. So could it be something as simple as that? Could it even be that what we want to do is attack the rook, trying to take the rook. Because then if he takes back with the queen, then we can go check. And regardless of if he takes with the knight or the king, then we can take back here again. And after he takes, we take again. And we end up with a rook versus knight scenario. So maybe there is a way for us to try and take this rook with our queen. Maybe by starting off with a move like this, or a move like this. Now, what does he do in response? For example, to queen g3, threatening to take the rook. And then whereupon he takes back, we play a check, and then collect the queen, essentially winning the exchange. So what does he do? One option is he moves the rook. He could move the rook. In that scenario, I'm not sure what happens, but I'm also now just doubling back to take a look at some more violent moves. Like let's say we just take the knight. Then let's say rook takes knight. We have bishop takes with check. We take here. And then in that scenario, we both have two rooks. My rooks are probably better attacking his pawns. So that sort of looks all right. The problem is, what if he takes with this pawn? If he takes with that pawn, I don't think we really have anything else there. I mean, this check, he simply takes. And although we take, he takes. We take again and he takes, and he's simply winning. So I think we can't do that. But we can consider this move. And this move to attack this. Let's say he comes here. We'll be out of dodge if we're on g3. But we'll be in dodge in terms of if we want to take. And then have him take and then go check. So actually this could be nice because it cuts away this possibility for him. So let's say we come here. Let's say he moves the rook here. Well, in that case, have we got anything there? Well, it's very difficult to say. We may have this bishop move attacking the rook again. Then let's say rook captures rook, we take here. He takes, we take, he takes. And again, we've simplified down to this bishop versus knight scenario where he has this extra pawn. So I just really don't see what to do here. Only about 40 minutes left. So this is tough. This is seriously tough to me. I think I probably would have played this already if it was a real game. Just to move this queen off and so he doesn't have this triplet lined up anymore. But what's the follow-up? What is the follow-up? After he moves the queen somewhere, do we just go take? And after he takes back, what if we don't go take? So what if this, he moves somewhere, and then we come here, threatening this rook. Let's say he trades, we take, he takes again, we take. Again, we're just not getting anywhere, except to an endgame where we're down a pawn. Really seems to be all that we can do. And that is quite frustrating. From this square, not only do we attack his rook, but we also defend our rook. So I quite like this idea, but what's he going to do? Does he just attack? Does he attack our queen? I don't think that works because we get to play our idea of taking the rook and then going with check. And after he takes back, we take here, and we've won an exchange. So don't think that can be the move. I think he has to move the rook. If he moves it here, then that's where we're currently struggling. I suppose do we have this idea of attacking the queen then? Probably not, because let's say queen just takes. Queen takes, queen takes. He takes this rook. You know, that may well be the move, actually. So let's go through that again. If we come here, we're threatening to win an exchange. It's very difficult for him to prevent that, I think. Maybe, again, he can play one of these queen moves so that any sort of a queen takes can be just met by rook takes. Or even what he could possibly do is just move the rook back, the knight back. So that might be possible. But in that circumstance, then we're developing this bishop f5 move with maybe a little bit more strength and force. It still seems like he's going to be able to ultimately hold everything together. So I am stuck. I'm absolutely stuck. I think rather than just playing this forever trying to find the move, it might be the time to just play something. I don't see this leading anywhere direct. This at least is direct, but I can't tell where he's going to put his queen or what my follow-up is. But because I have to make a choice, I'm going to go for it. And that's the end of the streak. The correct move was, in fact, taking on h7 check. Black then has two approximately equal options, one of which is to take with the king. Now, I was saying there's no further checks available, really. And that is true. But what we can do is take the rook, which attacks the queen. Queen takes, rook takes, and what's the magic move? What's the magic move? Well, really, there's no magic move. It's just that we have a queen essentially versus a knight, a rook, and a pawn. And the evaluation here is just better for white. So why did I not see that this was so good for white? Why did I not see that? You know, just taking. What if he takes with the knight? Well, then we take, queen takes, rook takes, and rook takes. We have a queen versus both of these pieces. This move threatens, well, nothing much. Sort of threatens a pawn. The computer says this is plus 2.5, but I get the feeling this is a lot harder than plus 2.5. Why should this be so good for me? I really don't know. Let's say he just defends this pawn. Well, then I attack the pawn again, as well as the rook. Let's say the rook moves away with check. I move, and then he defends the pawn again. Just for argument's sake. I guess the queen is so mobile, isn't she? She's so mobile that it means I'm going to be able to win material with relative ease compared to what he's going to have to do. So I guess that's something to be aware of, is that simplifying down could be really good for you if your queen is very mobile. Let's start a new streak. That one was ridiculous in terms of how long it took. And we just have to keep on trying. Now, here we go. In this position, we have the option of giving a check. If the queen moves, we take the bishop. If the king moves, we take the bishop. And if the bishop moves, we take the bishop. So check and take the bishop. Here, what have we? We can castle, which immediately looks pretty nice. We can castle this way. The reason it looks nice is because the position's very open. We have two nice bishops peering into the position. We have a queen peering into the position. And now that I draw that arrow, I see that this check is extremely strong. Even if he jumps back with the knight preventing checkmate, we follow up with checkmate anyway. So let's just go check and checkmate. Let's make a practice of looking at all our moves. Here's an obvious check with a skewer. Let's just take that. Here he's just gotten a queen, but that looks like it's going to be checkmate in 2. So 1, 2. Here he's attacking our queen. We could take it if we want. We do also have here a double check. Double check forces the king to move. So he doesn't have time to take our queen. Once the king moves, the question is where is it going to move? If he does come here, we take here with check, and that's really nice. If instead he moves here, well then we have this checkmate, which really only leaves this move to be considered. In that case, we can play check, and then we're going to pick this up shortly thereafter at the very least. So here, like I said, we take the queen with check. Here it's black to move. Looks like we can just come in here with a check. Once the king moves, there's this pattern of giving the queen up for a back rank mate. Back rank mates, the vulnerable first rank. Go have a look at that chapter of the YouTube series based on Irving Schoner's book. All right, now here we go. This knight is sort of pinned, sort of not really pinned. It would be pinned if we can get this bishop to move, because if this bishop moves, then this guy will actually be pinned, and we can provide further attacking forces to it. He can defend it in several ways, however, and that's a little bit annoying. So another thing we can maybe do here is actually this. This move attacks the knight for a second time. It also threatens mate, so it's a double attack, which utilizes a pin. So if we play this, he doesn't want to get mated. What are the possible ways he can use to defend this square? Well, he can intercept our queen's attack by using either of the knights. So in fact, even this attacked knight, he can move back. Then, however, we would like to be able to capture this, except that the bishop's still there. So I kind of like the idea of starting with b4 to get this bishop to move. Don't really care where it moves. Even if it moves here to attack our rook, we can just move it again and say, get out of here, mate, get out. Eventually we're going to move him back to this square, one way or other. I don't think he's going to give himself up like this, because then we take this knight as well. So if we do this, he's going to have to move and leave this queen undefended, at which point this move becomes stronger, because the idea of just jumping the knight back here doesn't work anymore, because we get to win this undefended queen. So in that circumstance, he'd probably have to defend like this, for example, which defends the knight again. It also breaks the pin and the interruption of the queen's attack on heir g7. So therefore, let's say we take the knight, he takes back. Again, I'm finding this difficult. Very difficult. Now, another move that comes to my mind is just seeing that this queen looks very overloaded. It's defending the knight, it's defending the bishop, it's defending the other knight. So what if we play b4, getting rid of this bishop, one way or other banishing it to b5. Then we can play bishop takes knight. And after queen takes knight, then we can take this other knight. So I think that's going to work. So let's go with b4, and it's already game over. It's already game over. All we really needed to do was even more forcefully take the knight immediately, attacking the queen. Once the queen recaptures, which it has to do, the knight already hangs. We don't need to start with b4. That said, what's the problem with starting with b4? Well, the problem with starting with b4 is, well, what? He attacks our bishop, but does that really matter? We take bishop, attacking his queen, so he takes back. He's attacking our bishop now, so let's say we bring it back. It still seems to me like we've won material here. And we have. We've won material, but despite both of us having 2 rooks, a queen, and a knight, we have a bishop essentially for 2 pawns. It's still much better for black. Now that's difficult for me to wrap my head around. Why should it be so much better for black when materially we have more on offer? I mean, it could just be that he's attacking our rook immediately right away. So, okay, we play something like this, and now this bishop's going to fall, and our material advantage goes away. In general, though, going for the more direct routes, just take this, really forces him to recapture. Then we take this, and there's no complication. Really difficult puzzle streaks, or I'm just very, very sub-average chess player, or both. Now, we got one more attempt at this, because really we got about half an hour left on the clock. So how are we going to make the most of this? Let's see. We can give a check. That forces him back. Then we can give a check, skewer, and win a rook. We're going to have an easy end game there, so nothing really much to worry about. Here we have a checkmate, so we'll just take it. In this scenario, we have a check that forces the king here. We then have this check, and it's going to be mate in a couple. Now we can, if we want, we can take the queen. Even if he gives this check, we take, he takes, we take, and we're up a rook. So I don't see why we would not just very simply take the queen. And we take, he takes, we take, we're up a rook as mentioned. Now, this square is just being annihilated by us. Question is, how do we do this? Let's be as direct as we can. What if we take with the queen? It's check. And if he wants to simply move away, well, then we just simply come back with another check. That forces the rook to come and defend, but then we can provide this check. Look, I don't think it's great, because let's say he just simply takes. Then we provide another check and he moves away. I don't love that. Why not start like this? Attacking his queen. It's very violent. We attack the queen. He's got no recourse to any checks at all. He could maybe try something like this, but keep in mind, the moment we move away and take the queen, we're doing it with a check. So I don't really even need to calculate. And as you can see, not calculating is what gets you into trouble. What was wrong with taking with the knight? Okay, rook takes, we take, he moves to the side, and we've run out of horsepower. I mean, technically, the position is still a tiny edge for white. It's not bad, per se, but it is bad when you compare it to taking with the bishop. Why? Well, the king can't move. I mean, literally not at all, except if he wants to move here, at which point it's important to note that this would be checkmate. Oh, I wouldn't have seen that. I should have seen it, but I wouldn't have. I think I would have been too tempted by a discovery. But even the discovery here is exceptional, and leads to mate shortly thereafter. So the other option is here he takes with the rook. The difference is now after check, we actually get to mate him. So let's go with one more streak. One more streak. Here's a mate. That's easy. Here we have not got a checkmate, but after we give check and he blocks, which is the only legal move, then we can take, he takes, and we're going to get a queen, and that's easy. So we take. If he wants to do it that way, again, we get our queen anyway. And then we would have come back to skewer him and win the rook. Here we've got a nice, easy fork. If he takes, we take, he takes, and we just have way too much material. In this position, there's a beautiful check, and that sets up a mate over here, so we can go for that. Here we have a lovely little Chekhoruski, followed by Mataruski. In this position, it would be nice to give this check, but he simply takes. What might be better is to actually distract his king, and therefore we win a full exchange, rather than just an equal trade. Here, what are we to do? Good questions. We've got a check. He can simply take, however, so I don't like that. We can come here. let's say he trades some rooks. What's the point in that, you might ask? And it's a great question. We could try and play something like f4. f4 could have some potential to it. Idea being, if he takes, we take this. And even if he moves his king out of the way, we just come back. Everything's defended and we've won some material. But let's just say he plays f6. We take, he takes. We've really not achieved anything there. So I don't think that's going to be the move. Therefore, let's move on. What about a move like this? Attacking this knight again. Let's say he takes here. Then, all right, sure, we take. This knight is no longer pinned. So if he takes, we take, everything's looking pretty even. But what if he takes here and we take with the knight so that we keep this knight pinned? Maybe the king moves out of the way somewhere. So we can't keep this knight pinned forever. We should consider this move as well. Take. He takes back and then we come here. But then he's going to take this. We're going to take this. He's going to move his king. And it's going to be hard for us to actually win this pawn back, I think. So what about a move like this? Just putting our knight on a lovely square. Let's say he takes one set of rooks off the board. What then? If he moves somewhere like this, I mean, yeah, I don't see anything amazing. So again, we've got one of these very difficult scenarios. Now I see a move though. This check move is really nice. The reason it's nice is because it comes with the tempo, and it doesn't matter how he wants to take back. We're going to be able to win the rook at the end there. So check, and then take the rook. Okay, black to move. We've got two connected pass pawns here, and we're almost able to get a queen up here, but maybe not quite because he simply takes. And once we push through there, that would be nice. So what's he going to do if we play a3? If we play a3, let's say he goes after our e6 pawn. Well, then we simply go up here. We play a2. If he takes the pawn, we get a queen, and I'm sure we're going to win that endgame. Right? He takes this. We'll find a way to win. So let's say instead he comes here. Well, then again, same deal. We're going to get a queen. So I think on a3, I think he has to take. After he takes, we can play b2. And there's just no way for him to stop us getting a queen. Now in this position, looks like we're going to have some options, and I see what we're going to do. We're going to take here, force the king onto the same diagonal so we can do a nice little double attack. Here he's made a nice little fork. Going to win the exchange there. What are we going to do about it? We have to move the king. There's no other option. The question is, which of these two squares do we want to move the king to? I would suggest this would be a bit safer because we then possibly have e2 at our disposal in future. Also, we're attacking the knight immediately, which means we're threatening to take the knight, which means we're encouraging him to take our rook. If he takes our rook, though, we can take his rook with check as well. So I think that's pretty much going to be what we're going to do. After he moves, as he's done, we can move back and provide this check. Our knight's actually very safe up here indeed. We could maybe go something like this, but I don't think that's going to go down well after a move like checkmate occurs on the board. So I think this looks good. Check. Even if he blocks the check, once we come here, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like that knight has nowhere to go. All right, now, in this position, we almost have a checkmate. So what we can do is actually distract the queen away from the rook, and then take the rook. Let's do that. Now we have a check. The king has to move, and we can take the rook. All right. In this position, we could take the queen. He takes back. But another very nice option here, since the king and queen are aligned, why don't we put a rook here on g1? That denies him the ability to take our queen. It means we're going to take his queen and just have too much material. Too much material. And we are now doing as well as we have done at this point in terms of this particular puzzle streak. Now, there is a check here. There's a check here, but he blocks with the queen. So alternatively, we can just take here with check immediately. He can no longer block with the queen. The king is actually completely forced onto the f6 square. From the f6 square, we can come here, giving him another check. Now the king can step away to a square where he'll still defend the queen. But regardless of which of those two squares he chooses, we can check him again. We can check him again, which may be nice. Certainly it seems like starting off with this can't be too bad. Would we prefer to take like this? I don't think so, because here we're taking with a check. It's a nice tempo move. We can also follow up with this move, which looks a lot like checkmate. Here he's attacking our bishop. Our bishop is happily defended and also happily defending. One thing we can do is provide a little skewer though. And at that point, he's going to have to part ways with one of these two rooks. And we're going to have a lot of material with which to win the game. Now, here, if we take this pawn and he does anything other than, let's say he moves this pawn, boom, 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 we're going to get a queen. So this forces him to take back. Then we can take here. And then we may have a pawn race on our hands. If he does this, we can come here. If he keeps pushing, we push, 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 queen. His move though, so I don't know if I love that. What we could also do is take immediately, but then he takes here anyway. He takes there anyway. So once we move back and he pushes, push, 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 push. Again, he's the first one to get the queen. So after this and this, what if we come here then? He can give us a check. We can step here. This is tough. This is really tough. Maybe it's a matter of taking the opposition. But after he pushes, I don't love that. This is tough. So take, take. Take. So we can have an outside pass pawn. And even once he pushes there, let's come down. If he starts coming along this way, then we can come here. He comes here. We can start pushing. He's going to have to go there. We're going to come here. Yeah, look, I think that's going to work, because ultimately what we're going to do, we're going to force his king to make its way over and take this pawn. In the time he's doing that, we're going to take this pawn and promote this pawn. So this is going to be the winner. This is just the start. Okay, we want to take this first. Oh, I really wanted to go back and see that in its entirety. So can we do that? Just a quick side note. He takes, we take. But, so what happens here? Let's say he pushes. We come back. Doesn't 100% matter as long as we're within the square. So I was going to come here. And let's say he comes across this way. We start pushing. He comes across further. I was going to say we push again. Okay. He needs to stop us. We push again. He takes. Now we come here. Now this guy's a goner. So even if he tries to come back, we're going to take. If he tries to come back, well, it's just too little too late. Because look at this, where we're not going to lose this position, even against Stockfish. As long as we control these squares, we're all good. And that's going to be all she wrote. We're going to get a queen and win the game, so that was a nice one. All right, in this position, we've been given a check. We have the option of dropping either the king or the queen. That's it. That's all we have to think about in this position. Which of those two moves would we prefer to do? Now, I think it's probably better to keep the queen active just as a matter of principle. So let's say we drop our king. In that case, there's a check right here. And if we then move our king here, which would be essentially forced, at the very least we lose this pawn. So maybe that's not so great. Maybe we should do this move instead. Now we're attacking both the rook and the queen. So let's say he takes the queen. Well, we also take a queen. The rook is still attacked. Let's say, the rook actually can't really make it anywhere particularly useful. There's nowhere it can go where it's not going to be just taken. So let's say he takes our knight, we take the rook, he takes the pawn. In the resulting position, we have a bishop. Not maybe the world's greatest bishop, but we should have what we need there to win that game. Eventually through some sort of a zugzwang. So I think that's going to be correct. Here we have a check. The check forces him here, and then we have a checkmate. So that's a very nice and simple one. Thank you very much. All right, now here we have a check, but that loses a queen. We also have this check, and that looks like it's a forced mate in 2, as compared to this, which allows him the opportunity to ruin us. So let's go with the check, and it's mate in 1, 2. In this position, it's black to move. Black to move. We do have a checking possibility right here. A nice little checking possibility here, which also wins the queen. Very hard to go past something like that. It's only going to be 2 rooks versus 2 rooks and a bishop. Why not? Why not? All right. This streak is going better. This is more like it. Now we're maybe warmed up. We can attack the queen and the bishop. Now, it's very difficult for this queen to maintain contact with the bishop because this diagonal is taken, and once the knight moves away, this bishop will control this diagonal. So all of these 3 squares here that would keep the bishop defended are going to be inaccessible. As a result, well, the queen still has to move given that it's under attack. Let's say he moves somewhere, well then we simply take the bishop. I can't see why that won't be the move. There it is. All right, now in this position, what do we want to do? We can attack this queen. The queen doesn't have a lot of great squares, only one safe square really. Only one safe square. And from there, what can we do from there? From there we can lift our rook, attacking the queen again. That queen has nowhere safe to go and will have to give itself up most likely for the rook. So I like that. It gives itself up for the bishop instead. All right, in this position, this is not pinned because even if we move, if he takes the rook, our other rook defends. There's no pin there necessarily. One thing we can do is unleash an attack on this rook at the same time as we unleash an attack on the queen. So that looks really nice, attacking the queen. The queen certainly doesn't want to give itself up for a pawn. So let's say the queen moves, I don't know, back to where it was. Well, thanks for the rook. And I don't see any kind of great follow-up there. Check, we simply take. Everything is defended amply. I think that's going to be the move. We'll take the rook, thank you. All right, so now it's white to move. White to move, and it looks like black's trying to go this way. And as white, we're trying to go this way and get a queen. And we're nearly there. Maybe if we could play a move like this, then how does black actually stop us from getting our queen? You know? Another thing we could do is we could come here and attack this pawn and also, you know, defend this square. But if we ever get this queen and then take the rook and then take back, all we've got is a knight against a pawn. And a knight against a pawn is going to be at best a draw for us and at worst a loss because we can't win with just a knight. So I think that the best option here really looks like this move, just to prevent the rook from ever taking our queenable pawn. If he takes the rook, takes the knight there, then sure, we trade and then we get our queen. So I don't see a problem, and I don't see why that's even remotely difficult. we're just going to get a queen now. All right. These puzzles definitely vary a lot in difficulty, I think. Let's see. If I take here, he would have to take back with the rook, at which point I can take again, at which point he has to take with the king, at which point I can give a check, skewering the king. King moves, I take this, he takes that. We both have a bishop. He's got an extra pawn, however. Therefore, is there something better I can do? What if I attack this guy straight away? There's nowhere he can move that will also defend this rook. So therefore, if he moves away, then I take this, he takes back, I take, yeah, that's nothing necessarily too special there either, that I can tell. So, what else have we got? If we play something like this, we could aim for some sort of a check, but he'd be able to block the check in a variety of different ways. Not really, because we can take, and if he ever takes back, he will drop this rook. So maybe this move is nice. Just threatening the check. Just threatening the check. And if he moves, well, then, then maybe this check is nice. So maybe we should even start with this, just to cover this square. Yes, it comes with a tempo. The tempo is we're threatening to take the knight, and after you take back, we're going to take again, and we've just won a full knight. So it does come with a nice tempo. And he can defend the knight. To be fair, he can defend the knight. But even then, we take, he takes, we take, he takes, we take, he takes. So yes, he can defend the knight, no problem. But in defending the knight, he also pins the knight. That knight can no longer move because now this rook here will actually hang. So if he does that, we can do something like this and aim to provide this check. The moment we play this C move, he'd love to put his bishop here to guard the square, but he can't because we're going to take that as well. So actually I think this, and this sets up a position that's very hard for him to deal with. And he'd love to cover the c4 square, perhaps by playing b5, but we take en passant, and once he takes back, we get this check in. And at that point, the king has to move away. We're going to end up winning material. I think that's it. So that's correct. What I didn't calculate, though, was what do we do in the case that instead of trying to defend the rook, he instead immediately moves away? And that's a very good question. I suppose the answer is we're just going to try and win this exchange. Because why not? Okie doke. So we're up to 25. We're halfway there. The session's almost over, so we can actually try and complete this in the next session. We can keep this streak going, though, in the meantime. So this position's quite complicated. There's a lot of heavy pieces on the board. We both have 2 knights. They've got, I suppose, an extra pawn because they've got 5 pawns. We've only got 4. Our pawn structure is not great with this isolated pawn here, which is also currently under heavy fire. So what do we do? It sort of seems like there might be something happening with a knight at some point, just because it hits a queen. Problem is, it only hits a queen, so the queen can always move out of the way. In addition, the square itself is already covered by a rook. So what can we really do here? We can attack the rook this way. He can't take because we're guarding ourselves. So the rook would likely have to move. Possibly somewhere like this. But what else is there? What if we take this? If we take this, and he takes with the rook, well then we're able to get this 7th file for our knight, but again without any great big effect. Maybe we could take this pawn, but again he's just going to take there, so I don't think that has anything wonderful to it either. All right, so are there any checks? Let's go through the forceful moves. Let's use the Chernev and Reinfeld method. There's no checks with the knight. There's no checks with the queen. No checks with this knight. No checks with anything. Well, there is actually one check, and that's it. There is this check right here. So if we play this check, we've won a pawn. He could then take with his queen, at which point we can take his queen. We're still up a pawn. We're up a pawn and we're attacking a rook. The likely move there would be that he takes our knight, at which point we've given a knight for a pawn. But we can then play this check. We can play this check. I think then, though, he simply moves away. But it certainly is interesting, though, that this check is not completely unplayable. If he were to take with the rook, then this immediate check up here, while the knight still guards these squares, meaning the king can't use them, forces him to essentially give up his queen or a knight. The knight also can jump back. So I don't think that's the move. I really don't think that is the move. Okay, but interesting to note that was there. Is there any other forceful moves? Any other forceful moves? Well, what if we add another attacker to this pawn? Does that help us at all? The threat there is to take. He takes back. We take, he takes, and we take. Not a huge threat. Easily dealt with. What else can we do? I mean, this is maybe a move, but he simply takes us. He simply takes us. Then after we take, he takes, we're in that similar situation where we have a check up here, but either he blocks with the knight or he just brings the king forward. So I don't think that's going to be it either. We could go for this, rook a8, and the threat is simply to take the rook with check. That would be a nice threat. That's a very violent, threatening move. Problem is he simply takes. After he takes, though, we take back, hitting this rook. When the rook moves, presumably to here, so that he defends this pawn. Is that, do we have an in-between move? Like once he takes here, can we then play check? I mean, I doubt it. I doubt it. Because again, what if he just, well, he can't move there, I suppose, but let's say he takes, we take. Okay. He's already taken a rook. Yes, we're threatening this rook and the other rook, so we're going to win a rook back potentially, but let's say he comes here. We take. We got two knights there. No, I just don't think that's really it. Got a couple minutes and then this session ends, so I'm not going to rush this. If I don't have the answer, we'll leave it as a cliffhanger and we'll come back another time. We'll just have to come back another time. But let's see. I do see one other option. What about knight takes d6? That's another capturing move, another violent move. It comes with tempo on the rook and on the queen, and particularly on the queen, because that queen capture would also come with a check. So let's say we take here. We're attacking the queen must move. After the queen moves, we can take the rook. Alternatively, he takes our knight, but if he takes our knight, we take his rook. So we've got a pawn and a rook for a knight. I think that's going to be the answer. Let's play it. And that's it. All right, let's go with this. This will be one more, then I think the alarm is going to go off saying that we've finished for the day. This is another endgame scenario. We're playing as white. We can take on h7. If we take on h7, essentially we force the king onto the 8th rank, at which point in time we can play either a check, or if he's gone somewhere else, we can just come here and we've opened up the H file for our pawn. So let's say check, and even if he comes here, we have to move our rook away somewhere smart. Maybe even we check him wherever he goes. He takes us, we come here. No, because he's going to catch up with us. But we take, let's say he comes here. What if we then come here? For instance. Okay, we're then threatening to go h7 and h8 mate. So after this, he comes here, for instance. What if we then come here with our king? Let's say he takes our pawn, our king steps here, and now we're threatening the rook and also threatening mate. That's the alarm. I'll stop the alarm for now. I'll stop the alarm. We'll finish this particular one and then we'll call it a day. So I think check. That forces him to one of these three squares. So check forces him to one of these three squares. This one, if we look at this one first, we can give a check. And once he moves, we can take this pawn as well. And so that seems like it's going to be good for us. We're just winning 2 pawns there. So after check, that really leaves these 2 squares. If he uses this square, well, then we can come here and we're actually immediately threatening checkmate. So this, he comes here, we come here, we're threatening checkmate. So if he takes our pawn, we just come back here and it's checkmate. So check, he comes here, we come here. He needs to do something about the threat of mate. If he comes, this way with his king, we come here, we're defending our pawn. Again, we're threatening mate. If he comes this way, again, we can come here, defend our pawn. And essentially just look to play h7. And even though he starts moving his pawn, we play these moves and we're going to win. I think this is basically unbeatable. So here we're going to give a check again. And then I was just going to take this pawn. I don't see why we shouldn't just simply take an extra pawn. But I'll just pause. Maybe we should do something different and then take, but why not just take this pawn? We've got 2 pawns. They defend each other. He's only got 1 pawn. We should be able to track him down and win there, I think. Maybe we bring the king in, and even if he moves, we come here. If we do this and he takes this, we come here. That doesn't really seem as good as just taking the pawn. All right, so now he's moved. What we do from here matters. Probably we would like to play a move like this, but he takes with check, which isn't great. Although it allows us to come here, and we're going to win that pawn then with 2 things attacking it. It's not easy though. Not easy. Could play a move like this. Could play a move like this. That might be the way to go. Because then he can't advance the pawn. We simply take. And if he moves the rook away somewhere, well, then we get in front of the pawn. Then we're going to try and get behind the pawn. We're going to give checks. Not checks, sorry, but we're going to be able to capture things. So I think we want to keep these guys intact. And to do that, we need to keep our rook where it is. We need to get our king within the square that this pawn makes. And I think the most logical way to do that is, in fact, with e4, because any other of these squares within the square, i.e. this square and this square, if we were to use them, then he moves away with a check. And though we can move closer to him, and in both cases get back into the square, why would we do that when we can just come to e4 straight away, and any check just leads us to taking him? So it's got to be e4. He moves away. Why now would we not just simply take the pawn? Any reason to not simply take the pawn? Taking the pawn means our king protects our pawn. It frees up our own rook. It means we have 2 extra pawns. And we're doing well. I'm going to pause this streak here. We're going to come back tomorrow. Thank you for watching. And we're going to continue trying to improve. We've got some goals to achieve. We're going to do 2 tactics sessions like this every week, as well as 2 training games every week, and an analysis of a master level game once a week. There might also be some other things thrown in as we go. But for the moment, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.